The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystalline spires of Nexus Prime, its golden rays filtering through the atmospheric processors that kept the colony world habitable. Kira Voss stood at the edge of the observation deck, her dark hair whipping in the artificial breeze as she reviewed the geological surveys on her tablet. At 42, she possessed the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of transforming barren worlds into thriving colonies. Her work as a terraforming engineer had brought life to dozens of planets, but Nexus Prime held a special place. In her heart it was home. "Mom, you're going to be late for the council meeting," came a voice from behind her. Zane Voss emerged from the residential complex, his tall frame moving with the fluid grace of a trained pilot. At 25, he had inherited his mother's sharp intellect and his father's commanding presence. Though the latter had been absent from their lives for nearly a decade, his emerald eyes, so like his mother's, held a mixture of affection and concern. Kira smiled, closing her tablet, just reviewing the mineral composition reports one more time. "Something's not adding up about the Northern Territories." "When has anything ever added up on your first try?" Zane teased, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the transport hub. "Remember when you spent 3 weeks convinced the atmospheric readings were wrong on Kepler 440b? And I was right," Kira replied with a laugh. "The sensors were calibrated incorrectly." "Trust but verify, Zane. It's served me well." They boarded the hover tram that would take them to the city center. Nexus Prime's capital, Rora, sprawled across a vast valley, its architecture a harmonious blend of human engineering and the planet's natural crystal formations. The city hummed with activity merchants, hawking goods from across the galaxy. Children playing in parks where Earth flowers bloomed alongside alien flora, and the constant stream of ships arriving and departing from the spaceport. "Any word from Mira?" Kira asked, settling into her seat. "She's meeting us at the council building. Something about wanting to observe the proceedings for her political science thesis." Zane's expression softened at the mention of his childhood friend. Mira Chen had been part of their family for as long as he could remember, her quick wit and fierce loyalty making her an invaluable companion through the years. The hover tram glided silently through the city, passing the towering headquarters of various mining corporations that had made Nexus Prime their base of operations. The planet's unique mineral deposits, particularly the rare chromium crystals, essential for faster-than-light travel, had attracted companies from across the galaxy. While this brought prosperity, it also brought complications. "Zane," Kira said quietly, her voice taking on a more serious tone, "I need you to promise me something." He turned to face her, noting the tension in her shoulders. "What is it?" "If anything happens to me, I want you to take the evidence I've been gathering and get it to someone who can act on it. Not the local authorities, someone higher up the chain." "Mom, you're scaring me." "What evidence?" Kira glanced around the tram car, then leaned closer. "The mineral surveys don't match the extraction reports. Someone's been illegally mining in protected zones, and the environmental impact could be catastrophic. I think Victor Harlan and his associates are involved." Victor Harlan was the colonial administrator, a man whose political ambitions were matched only by his willingness to bend rules for the right price. He had opposed several of Kira's environmental protection initiatives, claiming they hindered economic growth. "Can't you just present your findings to the council today?" Zane asked. "I could, but I need more proof. What I have is circumstantial mineral traces, shipping discrepancies, altered geological reports. Harlan's too smart to leave obvious evidence." The tram slowed as it approached the government district. Through the windows, they could see the imposing structure of the Colonial Council building, its facade decorated with murals depicting the planet's terraforming history. Kira had contributed to many of those early projects, her name inscribed on the memorial wall honoring the pioneers who had made Nexus Prime habitable. As they disembarked, Mira Chen appeared beside them, her sleek black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. At 24, she possessed an analytical mind that complemented her warm personality. She had been studying off-world for the past 2 years, but her frequent video calls had kept her connected to the Voss family. At Kira, Mira embraced the older woman warmly. The title was honorary. Mira's parents had died in a mining accident when she was 16, and the Voss family had become her surrogate family. Mira, sweetheart, how are your studies going? Fascinating, actually. I've been researching corporate influence on colonial governments. Some of the patterns I've identified are quite disturbing. Kira and Zane exchanged glances. What kind of patterns? Kira asked. Resource extraction companies forming partnerships with local officials, environmental regulations being quietly modified, and in some cases, whistleblowers facing mysterious accidents or disappearances. A chill ran down Kira's spine. We should talk more about this after the meeting. They entered the council building, its grand lobby filled with representatives from various districts and corporations. Victor Harlan stood near the center, his silver hair and expensive suit marking him as a man of influence. He was deep in conversation with several mining executives, their voices too low to overhear. Ms. Voss, Harlan called out, his smile not reaching his eyes. I trust you've prepared your environmental impact assessment. Of course, Administrator Harlan, though I suspect you won't like my conclusions. The council values thorough analysis, even when it challenges our preconceptions. His tone was pleasant, but Zane noticed the warning in his eyes. The meeting proceeded with typical bureaucratic efficiency. Kira presented her findings regarding the ecological damage in the northern territories, supported by detailed geological surveys and atmospheric readings. She carefully avoided mentioning her suspicions about illegal mining, focusing instead on the scientific evidence of environmental degradation. Several council members asked probing questions, but Harlan seemed more interested in discrediting her methodology than addressing her concerns. He questioned her data sources, suggested alternative explanations for the mineral trace anomalies, and repeatedly emphasized the economic importance of the mining operations. While we appreciate Ms. Voss's dedication to environmental protection, Harlan concluded, we must balance ecological concerns with economic reality. I propose we table this discussion pending further investigation. Kira felt a surge of frustration, but maintained her professional composure. Administrator Harlan, the evidence shows anomalies that could have multiple explanations. He interrupted, without definitive proof of wrongdoing. We cannot jeopardize the livelihoods of thousands of workers based on speculation. The council voted to postpone action, much to Kira's disappointment. As the meeting adjourned, she gathered her materials while Zane and Mira waited nearby. She noticed Harlan watching her intently, his expression unreadable. Don't worry, Mom, Zane said as they left the building. You've planted the seed. Sometimes that's enough to start change. Your son's right, Mira added. Political processes take time, but truth has a way of surfacing. Kira smiled at their optimism, but privately she wondered if patience was a luxury they couldn't afford. The environmental damage was accelerating, and if her suspicions were correct, the illegal mining operations would only expand. That evening, as Nexus Prime's twin moons rose over Aurora, Kira sat in her study reviewing the evidence she had gathered. Shipping manifests that didn't match geological surveys, environmental reports that had been subtly altered, and communication logs between mining companies and government officials. The pattern was clear to her, but proving it would require more than circumstantial evidence. She activated her secure communication system and began composing a message to a contact in the Galactic Environmental Authority. If local channels were compromised, she would need to go higher up the chain of command. As she typed, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. But when she looked out her window, the street appeared empty, unbeknownst to Kira. Her instincts were correct. In the shadows across the street, a figure monitored her activities through advanced surveillance equipment. Victor Harlan had not achieved his position by leaving loose ends untied, and Kira Voss had become a problem that required a permanent solution. The next morning would bring tragedy that would change everything, setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately expose the truth Kira had died trying to reveal. The funeral pyre burned against the twilight sky of Nexus Prime, its flames reaching toward the stars as if trying to carry Kira Voss home to the cosmos. She had spent her life terraforming. Zane stood motionless beside the ceremonial platform, his emerald eyes reflecting the dancing fire while tears carved silent paths down his cheeks. The official report claimed a tragic accident. A malfunctioning atmospheric processor had exploded while Kira was conducting routine maintenance. But Zane knew better. She never worked alone on processors. He whispered to Mira, who stood beside him offering silent support. Mom was too careful, too experienced. Someone wanted her dead. Mira squeezed his hand gently. The evidence will surface, Zane. These things always do. But as the weeks passed, the investigation stalled. Victor Harlan expressed his condolences publicly while ensuring that Kira's research disappeared into bureaucratic limbo. Her files were confiscated for security review, and her assistant was transferred to another department. The message was clear: Kira Voss was to be forgotten, along with her inconvenient discoveries. 3 months after the funeral, Zane sat in a dingy bar on Titan Station, nursing his third whiskey and studying the holographic display of his target. The alcohol did nothing to dull the rage that had been building inside him since his mother's death. He had spent his savings hiring information brokers and following leads across 3-star systems, slowly piecing together the network of corruption that had killed her. Jax Morrison, he muttered, memorizing the face on the display. Morrison was a smuggler who had been transporting illegal mining equipment to Nexus Prime. According to Zane's sources, he was also the one who had planted the explosive device that killed Kira. Talking to yourself is the first sign of madness. You know. Zane turned toward the voice and found himself looking at a woman who seemed to have stepped out of shadow itself. She was tall and lean, with raven black hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and steel gray eyes that missed nothing. Her dark clothing was practical yet elegant, designed for movement and concealment. A vibration blade hung at her hip, and Zane could see the subtle bulge of a plasma pistol beneath her jacket. "Can I help you?" he asked warily. "The question is whether I can help you," she replied, sliding into the booth across from him. "You're hunting Jax Morrison, so am I, and you are Raven Sinclair. I'm what you might call a problem solver." She gestured to the barkeeper, who brought her a glass of amber liquid without being asked. "Word is you've been asking questions about a certain smuggler. Dangerous questions." Zane studied her carefully. There was something predatory about her grace, like a hunting cat sizing up its prey. Yet her voice held a warmth that seemed genuine. "What's your interest in Morrison?" "He killed someone I cared about, a contact who was helping me track illegal weapons shipments." Raven took a sip of her drink, her eyes never leaving his face. "The same shipments that were being used to eliminate inconvenient witnesses, like my mother." "Kira Voss, yes, I know who you are, Zane. I've been following your investigation with interest. You're good, better than most amateurs, but you're going to get yourself killed if you keep this up alone." Zane felt a spark of anger. "I can handle myself, can you?" Raven leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Morrison isn't just a smuggler. He's a professional killer with military training and connections to some very dangerous people. You're a pilot with a death wish and no experience in this kind of work. Then why are you talking to me instead of just doing whatever it is you do?" For the first time, Raven's composed expression flickered. "Because sometimes even professionals need allies, and because your mother deserves justice, not just revenge." Something in her tone made Zane reconsider his initial assessment. Beneath the dangerous exterior, he sensed a deep well of pain that mirrored his own. "What are you proposing?" "Partnership. I have the skills and connections you need. You have legitimate reasons to be asking questions that would get me killed. Together, we might actually succeed." Zane finished his whiskey, weighing her words. Trust didn't come easily anymore, but his solo efforts had yielded little beyond near-death experiences and dead ends. "What do you know about Morrison's current location?" Raven smiled, and for a moment her austere features transformed into something almost beautiful. "He's on Kepler Station, meeting with his handler, a man named Counselor Thorne, who has been coordinating the cover-up from the political side." Thorne, Zane's blood ran cold. He remembered the counselor from his mother's environmental hearings, a soft-spoken man who had seemed sympathetic to her concerns. He was one of the few officials who supported Mom's work. "Public support can be very different from private action," Raven said grimly. Thorn has been taking payments from mining corporations for years. Your mother's investigation threatened to expose the entire network. The revelation hit Zane like a physical blow. His mother had trusted Thorn, had even invited him to their home for dinner on several occasions. The betrayal cut deeper than he had expected. "How do we get to Morrison?" he asked, his voice hard with renewed determination. "Carefully, Kepler. Station is neutral territory, which means fewer legal protections, but also fewer questions asked. Morrison thinks he's safe there, which makes him vulnerable." They spent the next hour planning their approach. Raven's knowledge of criminal networks and security systems complemented Zane's piloting skills and technical expertise. As they worked together, he found himself drawn to her intelligence and competence. There was something magnetic about her. Confidence, the way she commanded attention without seeming to try. "Tell me about yourself," he said during a break in their planning. "How does someone become a professional problem solver?" Raven's expression grew distant. "Life doesn't always give you choices. Sometimes you adapt or you die. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm prepared to give right now." She met his eyes directly. "Trust takes time, Zane. Let's see how we work together before we start sharing life stories." 2 days later, they arrived at Kepler Station aboard Zane's modified transport ship, the Stellar Wind. The station was a sprawling commercial hub built into a hollowed-out asteroid, its corridors teeming with traders, mercenaries, and others who preferred to operate outside conventional legal frameworks. Morrison was meeting his contact in a private dining area of the station's most expensive restaurant. Raven had acquired blueprints of the establishment and identified 3 possible escape routes. Their plan was simple: intercept Morrison after his meeting and extract information about his employers before turning him over to authorities. "Remember," Raven said as they took positions outside the restaurant, "we need him alive. Dead men can't testify." Zane nodded, checking his sidearm one final time. His hands were steady, but his heart raced with anticipation. After months of investigation, he was finally close to answers. Morrison emerged from the restaurant exactly when Raven had predicted. A stocky man with cybernetic implants along his jaw, and the confident swagger of someone who believed himself untouchable. He was alone, having sent his bodyguards ahead to prepare his ship for departure. They followed him through the station's winding corridors, staying far enough back to avoid detection. Morrison moved with purpose toward the docking bay where his ship waited. It was the perfect ambush point, isolated and with limited security coverage. "Now," Raven whispered. They moved with practiced coordination, Zane blocking Morrison's retreat, while Raven appeared from a side passage with her weapon drawn. For a moment, the smuggler looked genuinely surprised. "Jax Morrison," Raven said calmly. "You're going to answer some questions." Morrison's hand moved toward his weapon, but stopped when he saw the deadly intent in her eyes. "Raven Sinclair, I heard you were dead. Rumors of my demise were greatly exaggerated. Unlike Kira Voss, the terraformer, that wasn't personal, just business." Morrison shrugged as if discussing the weather. Someone wanted her silenced, and "I provide services." Zane felt rage surge through him at the casual dismissal of his mother's life. "Who hired you? Kid, you have no idea what you're playing with. The people behind this have resources you can't imagine. They've got politicians, military officers, corporate executives, names." Raven interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet. Morrison laughed bitterly. "You think I'm stupid enough to keep records? The less I know, the longer I live." Before either Zane or Raven could respond, the lights in the corridor suddenly cut out. Emergency illumination kicked in a second later, casting everything in hellish red shadows. They heard the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging. "Ambush!" Raven shouted, diving for cover behind a maintenance panel. Plasma bolts lit up the corridor as armed figures emerged from concealment. Morrison used a confusion to break for his ship, but Zane tackled him before he could escape. They rolled across the deck, fighting for control of Morrison's weapon. Raven moved like liquid shadow, her vibration blade carving through attackers with lethal precision. Her movements were poetry and death combined, each strike calculated for maximum effect. Despite the chaos around him, Zane found himself mesmerized by her deadly grace. "Behind you!" he shouted as another attacker appeared. Raven spun, deflecting a plasma bolt with her blade before closing the distance and ending the threat. In moments, the corridor fell silent. The interrogation chamber aboard the Stellar Wind hummed with tension. As Jax Morrison slowly regained consciousness, his cybernetic implants flickered weakly. Damage from the fight on Kepler Station, Zane stood against the bulkhead, arms crossed, while Raven sat across from their prisoner with predatory patience. "Where am I?" Morrison mumbled, testing the restraints that held him to the chair. "Somewhere between justice and the void." Raven replied coolly, "The choice of which is entirely up to you." Morrison's eyes focused on Zane, recognition dawning. "You're the Voss kid. Should have stayed home, boy. Some stones are better left unturned." Zane stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "My mother died because she tried to protect an entire planet. The least you can do is tell me who ordered her murder, and sign my own death warrant. I may be a killer, but I'm not suicidal." Morrison leaned back as much as his restraints allowed. "Besides, you already know more than you realize." Raven tilted her head, studying him. "Enlighten us. The girl. The one who's been helping you research corporate influence patterns." Morrison's scarred face twisted into a cruel smile. "Nova Sterling. She's been getting closer to the truth than anyone realizes. Close enough to become the next target." Zane's blood ran cold. He had been in contact with Nova Sterling for weeks, sharing information about his mother's case. The investigative journalist had connections throughout the Galactic media network and had been instrumental in uncovering similar corruption on other worlds. "Where is she?" Raven demanded. "Last I heard, she was on Centauri Prime, following a lead about Director Blackwood. That's all you're getting from me." Before Zane could respond, the ship's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Nova Sterling's face appeared on the screen, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled and her eyes wide with fear. "Zane, if you're receiving this, then I'm probably already dead," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I've uncovered something huge, a conspiracy that goes all the way to the Colonial Authority. Director Marcus Blackwood has been orchestrating illegal mining operations across 7 systems. The environmental data your mother collected wasn't just evidence of local corruption. It was proof of systematic ecological destruction." The image flickered as static interfered with the transmission. Nova leaned closer to the camera, her voice urgent. "I've compiled everything into a data packet and sent it to the coordinates included with this message. Whatever you do, don't trust anyone in official channels. They're all compromised. I'm going underground until..." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving them staring at a blank screen. "Nova," Zane whispered, then turned to Morrison. "How long has she been in danger?" Morrison shrugged. "Blackwood's been tracking her for weeks. Professional courtesy, I warned her to back off, but journalists never listen." Raven was already moving toward the navigation console. "The coordinates she mentioned are in the Vega system, hidden data cache on a mining platform. We have to help her," Zane said. "She told us to retrieve the data, not play hero," Raven replied, though her tone suggested she was struggling with the same impulse. "The information might be our only chance to expose the conspiracy." Zane stared at the blank screen where Nova's frightened face had been moments before. The journalist had risked everything to help him find the truth about his mother's death. He couldn't abandon her now. "We do both," he decided. "We get the data, then we find Nova." Raven studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her steel-gray eyes. "You're going to get us killed with that noble streak of yours, maybe. But I won't be able to live with myself if we don't try." A ghost of a smile touched Raven's lips. "Your mother would be proud." They set course for the Vega system, leaving Morrison secured in the holding cell. During the 3-day journey, Zane found himself spending more time with Raven outside their mission planning. She was gradually opening up, sharing fragments of her past between lessons in combat tactics and surveillance techniques. "I had a sister once," she told him one evening as they shared a meal in the ship's small galley. "Lucia, she was younger, brilliant, always believed she could change the world through pure determination. What happened to her?" Raven's expression darkened. She uncovered corruption in the military procurement system. High-ranking officers were selling weapons to insurgent groups, while soldiers died with defective equipment. When she tried to expose it, they framed her for treason, and she died in prison before her case could be reviewed. Officially, it was suicide. Unofficially, someone wanted to send a message about the price of idealism. Zane reached across the table, covering her hand with his. The contact sent electricity through both of them, a connection that went beyond their shared mission. "I'm sorry, it's why I do what I do," Raven said softly. "Someone has to balance the scales when the system fails. Is that what this is? Balancing scales?" She turned her hand palm up, intertwining their fingers. "Maybe it started that way. But somewhere along the line, it became about more than justice. It became about you." The confession hung in the air between them, vulnerable and profound. Zane felt his heart racing as he looked into her eyes, seeing past the dangerous exterior to the wounded soul beneath. Raven. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship, interrupting the moment. They rushed to the bridge, where proximity sensors showed 3 ships emerging from hyperspace directly ahead of them. Military interceptors. Raven identified grimly. "Someone's been tracking us." The lead ship's communication channel opened, revealing a stern-faced woman in a Colonial Authority uniform. "Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Kane of the CSS Retribution. You are harboring a wanted fugitive. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Zane looked at Raven in confusion. "Fugitive, that would be me," she admitted. "My methods aren't always strictly legal. Admiral Kane has been hunting me for years." The famous Raven Sinclair, Kane's voice crackled through the speakers. "You've caused considerable trouble for some very important people. Time to face the consequences." Zane's mind raced. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but the stellar wind had some advantages. His modifications had enhanced the ship's speed and maneuverability, and he knew tricks that military pilots had never learned. "Hold on," he told Raven, his hands dancing across the controls. The ship suddenly dove and rolled, evading the interceptor's first volley of plasma fire. Zane pushed the engines to their limits, weaving through an asteroid field that would challenge even experienced pilots. Behind them, the military ships struggled to maintain pursuit in the treacherous terrain. "Where did you learn to fly like that?" Raven asked, gripping her seat as they narrowly avoided collision with a massive asteroid. "My mother taught me," Zane replied, pulling the ship through a gap barely wider than their hull. "She said the best pilots don't just know their ships, they become one with them." One of the interceptors clipped an asteroid while trying to follow their maneuver. Its damaged hull venting atmosphere. The remaining 2 ships broke off pursuit as Zane guided them into a dense debris field where sensors couldn't track them. "Effectively impressive," Raven said, genuine admiration in her voice. "But Kane won't give up that easily. She's as persistent as she is dangerous." They reached the mining platform in the Vega system without further incident. Finding it apparently abandoned, the facility hung in space like a metal spider, its processing equipment dark and silent, but hidden within its computer core was Nova's data cache, a comprehensive record of Director Blackwood's criminal operations. "This is incredible," Zane breathed as they downloaded the files. Mining operations on protected worlds, falsified environmental reports, bribes to officials across 12 systems. My mother's evidence was just the tip of the iceberg. And look at this. Raven pointed to a particular file. Communication logs between Blackwood and someone identified only as the architect. They're planning something called Project Renaissance. The communications were cryptic, but the implications were chilling. References to population reduction, resource optimization, and acceptable losses painted a picture of genocide disguised as economic development. "We need to get this to someone who can act on it," Zane said, "who, according to these files, half the Colonial Authority is compromised. Even some military leaders are involved." Before Zane could answer, the ship's sensors detected an incoming transmission from Nova's personal communicator. Her image appeared on screen again, but this time she was clearly being held prisoner. Director Marcus Blackwood stood behind her, a tall man with silver hair and the cold eyes of a predator. "Mr. Voss," Blackwood said smoothly, I believe you. Have something that belongs to me. Where is she? Zane demanded. Ms. Sterling is safe for now, but her continued well-being depends on your cooperation. Bring me the data you've stolen, and she lives. Refuse, and she joins your mother in the afterlife. Nova looked directly into the camera, her eyes fierce despite her circumstances. Don't give him anything, Zane. The truth is more important than any one life. Blackwood struck her casually, sending her tumbling from her chair. Such dedication to journalistic integrity. It would be admirable if it weren't so naive. Rage flooded through Zane, but Raven placed a restraining hand on his arm. Think, she whispered. He's manipulating you. The coordinates for the exchange are. The corporate facility designated as the exchange point loomed before them, like a fortress of black steel and crystalline windows. Blackwood Industries' logo glowed with cold blue light. Against the structure's main tower, a stark reminder of the power they were challenging. Zane piloted the stellar wind through the facility's defensive perimeter, every sensor on the ship screaming warnings about the weapons arrays tracking their approach. 47 defensive platforms, at least 2 squadrons of fighters in the launch bays, and enough firepower to reduce a small wounded debris, Raven observed grimly. Studying the tactical displays, Blackwood really doesn't want uninvited guests. The arrogance is almost insulting, Zane replied, his hands steady on the controls despite the tension coiling in his chest. He thinks we'll just walk into his trap, won't we? Zane's smile held no humor. We'll walk in, but we're walking out with Nova and enough evidence to bury him. They had spent the last 6 hours planning their approach, using the facility's public blueprints and Morrison's reluctantly provided intelligence about Blackwood's security protocols. The smuggler had finally agreed to cooperate after Raven convinced him that his employers would likely eliminate him. Regardless of his loyalty, dead men told no tales. After all, Docking Bay 7 came the crisp voice of flight control. Maintain current heading and prepare for guided approach. The stellar wind settled onto the landing platform with barely a vibration. Zane's piloting skills evident in the flawless touchdown through the viewports. They could see armed security personnel taking positions around the ship, their weapons trained on the exits. Remember the plan, Raven said, checking her concealed weapons one final time. I give you exactly 15 minutes before I come looking for you. And if something goes wrong, she leaned over and kissed him, fierce and quick. Then we go down fighting together. I've had worse ways to spend an evening. Zane made his way to the airlock, the data storage device containing Nova's evidence, secure in his jacket pocket. The original plan had been simple: trade the data for Nova, then extract both of them while Raven created a distraction. But Morrison's intelligence had revealed a complication that changed everything. The facility wasn't just a corporate headquarters. Hidden in its lower levels was a research installation, where Blackwood had been developing the technology behind Project Renaissance. If their suspicions were correct, he wasn't just stealing resources, he was preparing to deploy biological weapons against colonial populations. The airlock cycled open, revealing a reception committee of 12 guards in full combat armor. Their leader, a woman with lieutenant's insignia and cybernetic eye implants, gestured for Zane to follow. Director Blackwood is waiting, she said curtly. They escorted him through corridors lined with abstract artwork that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Everything about the facility screamed wealth and power, from the imported marble floors to the subtle holographic displays, showing Blackwood Industries' expanding influence across the galaxy. The executive conference room occupied an entire floor of the main tower, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the system's asteroid mining operations. Director Marcus Blackwood stood silhouetted against the starfield, his silver hair catching the light from the distant sun. Mr. Voss, he said without turning around, thank you for accepting my invitation. Where's Nova? Blackwood gestured to a side door, which opened to reveal Nova Sterling bound to a chair, but apparently unharmed. Her dark eyes blazed with defiant anger, and she shook her head slightly when she saw Zane, a warning he chose to ignore. As promised, alive and well, Blackwood said, finally turning to face him. Up close, the corporate director was an imposing figure, tall and lean with the kind of cold charisma that inspired both loyalty and fear. "Now, shall we discuss terms?" "The terms are simple," Zane replied, pulling out the data device. "Nova walks free, and this becomes your problem." "I'm afraid it's not quite that simple." Blackwood moved to the conference table, where several holographic displays showed tactical information about the surrounding star systems. "You see, the data Ms. Sterling compiled represents years of careful planning. Project Renaissance isn't just about resource extraction, it's about humanity's future." "Genocide isn't humanity's future," Zane said flatly. "Selective population management," Blackwood corrected smoothly. "The colonial worlds are overcrowded. Their resources stretch to the breaking point. In 50 years, we'll face system-wide ecological collapse unless we take action now. By murdering billions of people, by making difficult choices that others lack the courage to make." Blackwood activated one of the displays, showing demographic projections and resource allocation models. "The biological agents we've developed are precise, targeting specific genetic markers common in colonial populations while leaving Earth-born humans largely unaffected." The casual way he discussed mass murder made Zane's stomach turn. "You're insane. I'm practical. Your mother understood that, in the end." Rage exploded through Zane's careful control. "My mother fought against everything you represent. Your mother discovered our preliminary tests on Nexus Prime and threatened to expose them. But before we eliminated her, she had a fascinating conversation with our representative. She actually agreed that population control was necessary. She simply disagreed with our methods." The words hit Zane like physical blows. His mother, his brilliant, compassionate mother, discussing genocide with these monsters. It couldn't be true. "You're lying." Blackwood activated another display, showing a recording of Kira Voss sitting across a table from a figure whose face was obscured by shadows. Her voice was unmistakably hers, calm and professional even as she discussed unthinkable horrors. "The environmental damage is irreversible if current population trends continue." The recording played. "But targeting civilians is unconscionable. There has to be another way." "What other way?" the shadowy figure asked. "Voluntary population reduction. Massive investments in terraforming technology. The colonial authority lacks the resources and the political will for either option. Then we make them find the resources." Kira replied firmly. "Science provides solutions, not shortcuts." The recording continued. But Zane had heard enough. His mother hadn't agreed with Blackwood's methods. She had been trying to find alternatives, to convince them that genocide wasn't the only option. She was trying to save them, he whispered. "She was naive," Blackwood said dismissively. "Just as you are. The data you've compiled won't stop Project Renaissance. It will only force us to accelerate our timeline." Before Zane could respond, the lights in the conference room flickered. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the facility, and the holographic displays shifted to show security alerts from multiple sectors. "What's happening?" Blackwood demanded, touching his earpiece to communicate with security. The side door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and debris. Raven emerged from the smoke like an avenging angel, her vibration blade humming with deadly energy and her gray eyes blazing with fury. "Sorry I'm late," she said, cutting through Nova's restraints with surgical precision. Traffic was murder. Blackwood's guards raised their weapons, but Raven was already moving. She flowed between them like liquid shadow, her blade carving through armor and flesh with equal ease. In seconds, half the security team was down, and the survivors were scrambling for cover. "Zane, the data," Nova shouted, rubbing circulation back into her wrists. He tossed her the storage device just as Admiral Kane's voice crackled through the facility's communication system. "Director Blackwood, this is Admiral Kane of the Colonial Navy. You are under arrest for crimes against humanity. Surrender immediately, or face the consequences." Blackwood's composure finally cracked. "Impossible. Kane is one of ours." "Actually," came a new voice from the doorway, "Admiral Kane is one of mine." They turned to see a woman in military uniform entering the conference room, flanked by a squad of colonial marines. She was older than Kane, with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her uniform bore the insignia of a fleet admiral. Admiral Kane has been working undercover for my investigation into military corruption. The woman continued, I am Fleet Admiral Morrison, and you, Director Blackwood, are under arrest, Morrison. Raven's voice was barely a whisper, her face draining of color. The Fleet Admiral's gaze found Raven, and for a moment her professional composure wavered. Hello, Raven. It's been a long time, Lucia. Raven's weapon clattered to the floor as shock overwhelmed her. But you're dead. They said you died in prison. I did die, in a way. Lucia Sinclair died in that cell, but I was reborn as someone with the power to fight back. The Admiral's voice was gentle despite the chaos around them. I've been hunting the conspiracy that killed our old selves for 5 years. Blackwood took advantage of the reunion to activate a hidden panel in the conference table. If I'm going down, I'm taking the evidence with me. Plasma fire erupted from concealed weapons emplacements, forcing everyone to dive for cover. Through the chaos, Zane saw Blackwood retreating toward a private elevator, clutching a data pad that probably contained the override codes for Project Renaissance. He's getting away, Nova shouted. Zane sprinted after the direct,